this spring that we're practically eliminating the number of people waiting 1.5 years, and that's come down to just a few thousand now from over 100,000 at its peak, and we have plans in place to continue working on backlogs. But without the industrial action ending, of course that will be more difficult, and that's why I would urge consultants and junior doctors to accept the recommendations of the independent pay review body. This is not even the government, this is the independent pay review body who has made a recommendation on their pay, which we have accepted in full, on top of all the other things we've done for the NHS, like the long-term workforce plan just the other week, something that has been called for decades, we have delivered. I would urge them to accept this offer from the independent bodies, and that way we can all work collectively together to bring the backlogs down. I know that that's what the vast majority of them want to see happen. That's what I want to see happen, and I'm prepared to work with them to do that.
But will the NHS have to make savings?
As I said, one of the ways that we're raising money to pay for this is through the immigration health surcharge. That is money that goes to the NHS. So when people emigrate to this country, they have to pay something called the immigration health surcharge to contribute to the cost of the NHS, and the cost of that will go up as part of this announcement in order to raise more money for the NHS to help pay for some of these costs. And could I go next to Talk Radio?
Hello, Peter Cardwell, Talk Radio. Are you slightly hiding behind the independent pay review bodies here? The junior doctors are getting less than 1/5 of the percentage point rise that you're asking. How do you honestly expect us, I expect them to believe that this is a fair offer when they're asking for so much more? And won't strikes be inevitable now in the autumn?
This is a process. The independent pay review bodies are a process that has existed for a very long time. Indeed, it's an institution and a set of institutions that the unions themselves called for, and for a long time it's been accepted as the best fair way that we have in this country to find resolution on public sector pay. Now, there are representatives of unions, of government, of economists on the boards of these public sector pay review bodies. They make independent recommendations to the government, and they do so in a range of sectors. And that's what we've accepted. Right? That's what we've accepted, and we've accepted their headline recommendations in full. For junior doctors in particular, I'd say like a typical junior doctor on pay point 3 is going to receive a significant pay increase, around 9%, as a result of us accepting the PRB's recommendation. I think most people think that is a significant pay increase. For a typical junior doctor, 9%. That is the pay increase that is being delivered as a result of our decision today. And that comes along all the other things that we've done for the NHS. Record funding, a long-term workforce plan fully funded so that there are more doctors, more nurses, more of every type of healthcare worker in the NHS for the first ever time. Funded expansion of training places that everyone has called for. And as those junior doctors progress to become consultants and are paid even more, they will benefit from the significant tax cut that the Chancellor announced in the spring budget, which was the BMA's #1 ask of government. Was that pensions tax cut? We've delivered it, and those junior doctors, as their careers progress, will benefit from that. So look, taken together, I think we've done the fair thing, and I would urge the junior doctors and consultants to see that, to see the commitment that we have to the NHS, to recognise the economic context that we're in, and accept the recommendations of the independent pay review body, a process that is long established, is independent of government. We've done what I believe to be the right and responsible thing, and I would urge them to do the same thing too. Can I go to the Daily Mail?
Harriet Line, Daily Mail. How do you expect to bring down inflation to 5% when you're giving public sector workers a pay rise of in excess of 6%? And secondly, you said earlier this week that you didn't know who the BBC presenter facing serious allegations was. Were you shocked when you heard the news yesterday?
On your first point, Harriet, if you look at current pay settlements across different ranges, lots of different estimates and forecasts for what pay settlements in the private sector are averaging at the moment and are forecast to be. So whether you look at ONS data that was out the other day, Bank of England, Treasury has a panel that they use, Expert HR survey data as well. All of that points to private sector pay settlements in the kind of 5 to 7% range now and over the course of the year. And I think the vast majority of these PRB recommendations fit within that type of range. So they are broadly, obviously it's going to vary for each individual person depending on what grade they're in, but broadly in aggregate, the pay settlements from the PRBs are in line with what we're seeing in the private sector. That's the first thing to say. I think the second thing I'd say is, is it inflationary, is it not inflationary? It's not going to be inflationary because we're not borrowing to fund it. And I think, and I've been very clear about this, everyone can see the economic context we're in. I'm determined to bring inflation down, and government has a responsibility not to excessively borrow money. If we do that, we just will make the situation worse and make it last longer. I'm not going to do that, which is why we have had to make some other decisions elsewhere on visa fees, immigration health surcharge, reprioritisation to pay for these pay settlements, because that's what being government means. It's about prioritising, it's about making choices, doing the difficult and responsible things. That's what we've done, but I am determined to bring inflation down, and this is one of the things that will help us do that, because we have not borrowed to fund these pay increases. Next, could I go to the Telegraph?
Hi, Ben Riley-Smith, The Telegraph. Can I just drill into where the money's coming from? Because it's not coming from borrowing. About £1 billion's coming from these visa fees. That leaves a couple of billion, I think, that needs to be found from reprioritisation. Can you name a single thing that's going to be squeezed to get the money through reprioritisation?
Yeah, it's not one big thing, Ben. It will be a range of things. So the Chancellor and I and the Chief Secretary have engaged in an exercise with departments for a while. And I think many of you are asking, when are we going to see this decision on pay? When are we going to see it? It's because we've been taking the time to go through everyone's budgets to make sure that there are areas that where we can find reprioritisations from, where we're maybe not spending as much as we had anticipated, that we can shift over to public sector pay without impacting frontline service delivery, because that was very important to us. It was also important to the schools unions, and that's why they are confident that there is extra money going into the schools budget to make sure that these pay offers are fully funded. So it's not one big thing, it's just painstaking work of going through every department's budget line by line, finding every little bit of saving or where we're not quite spending as much as we thought, where we can shift that to public sector pay to make sure our workers are rewarded and that we honour the recommendations of the pay review bodies. But what I would say is that does mean choices, right? And I'm not shying away from that, because I think that's the right thing to do. But because we're raising money through fees and the immigration health surcharge, that contributes significantly and will ease some of that pressure. The Guardian, I think, lastly. We've got time. Yes.
Hi, Pippa Kerr from The Guardian. You talk about reprioritisation of what sounds like it's going to be about £2 billion worth of money. Can you guarantee that that decision won't mean more front-line cuts? Let's just call a spade a spade. And secondly, can I just ask you if you can give us a status update on Liz Truss's resignation peerages? Are we likely to see them over the summer?
On the previous question, it's the same thing. We have protected frontline services. So I think the teaching unions would not have supported this offer if they didn't believe that there was money coming into the core schools budget to help pay for these significant pay awards. So we've worked through the detail of that with them specifically to make sure that they are comfortable in how we're doing this. And as you can see, I very much welcome the engagement we've had with them, the constructive way that they've approached those conversations, and indeed their announcement today, which I think is enormously wonderful news for our children. It's important that we get them back into the classrooms and catching up on what they lost out on COVID. So I'm delighted with today's news. And more broadly, whether it's NHS or everywhere, we've funded the frontline services actually very generously, and we're now going to deliver on improving, as I said, people's waiting times for electives and all the rest of it. I haven't got an update for you on residential honours. They haven't come to me yet, and as I think you know, I tend to just follow the due process on these things. And I also, someone had a question before about the BBC. Look, I wasn't, sorry, I just forgot, I wasn't ignoring your question, but I would say, look, I think for all the reasons that everyone is aware of, this is an incredibly sensitive matter, and what I'd say is that the BBC is going through its process of fact-finding and establishing what's happened. The right thing is for them to get on with that, and for us to give them the space to do that and recognise the sensitivity of this for all involved. And there's nothing more than that I can or should say, I think, at this point. Good. I think that's it. We've got one last one. Yeah, Times.
You're standing up in front of a pledge to halve inflation, but minister after minister has refused to say what that means, what the actual target will be. Is it 5%? 5.35%, 5.5%. Can you today level with people and just say exactly what that target is, so we know what metric to judge you by? I
think that everyone can see what inflation was when I made that announcement I made the announcement in January, and we had the numbers, I think, for December last year. But look, do I think that everyone sitting at home is focusing on whether inflation goes down to 5.2, 5.4, 5.3? No, I don't. actually. What I think they want to know is that the government is committed to easing the burden on their cost of living. And that is my priority, and halving inflation is the most important step we have to doing that. And I want to do that over the course of this year. Clearly, that's become more challenging. Everyone can see that in the numbers. But that doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to say. You know, I am ambitious for our country. When I set those targets or priorities, lots of people said, well, that's all going to be too easy. You said all these things that you're going to easily meet. That was what people said. I didn't believe that. I thought it would be tough. But I thought it was the right thing to do because that's the way that we can bring maximum benefit to people's families up and down the country. And we're going to absolutely stick to the course. That's why today's decision is important. As I said, it wouldn't have been right to accept these pay offers and then fund them with borrowing. That would have been the easy thing for me to do. Wouldn't have involved me having to put fees up everywhere else on visa fees or immigration health surcharge. Wouldn't have involved, detailed work trying to find savings and reprioritisation from elsewhere. Would have been easy, but it would have been wrong. It wouldn't have been the responsible thing to do for the country because I'm determined to bring inflation down, and I'm confident that we will do so. And halving inflation is just a staging post because inflation belongs back where it should be at 2%. Right? So, this is a journey to get it down there, but that was the first step on the journey. But people should be left in no doubt about my resolve to deliver on it. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time.